When you say fantasy monster image, what are you referring to by that?
Well, the idea that I'm a homosexual thrill killer and all that. Like I strolled down the streets and stalked young boys and slapped.
Do you know the shocking story of John Wayne Gacy? Have you ever wondered how someone could lead a double life so terrifyingly dark that it sent shivers through an entire nation? On the surface, Gacy was an upstanding member of society, a well-known businessman, a community volunteer, and even a performer at children's parties, dressed as Pogo the Clown. But beneath this facade, he harbored a sinister secret. He was responsible for one of the most horrific killing sprees in American history. John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown, was convicted of the brutal murders of at least 33 young men and boys, a reign of terror that left a chilling stain on the American psyche. But how did this man, once known for his smile and generosity, become one of the most infamous serial killers of all time? Join us as we unravel the disturbing story of John Wayne Gacy, the man who played a clown by day, but was a cold-blooded murderer by night. John Wayne Gacy was born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois. Gacy was the second of 3 children and the only son of John Stanley Gacy, a World War I veteran and auto repair machinist, and Marion Elaine Robison, a homemaker. His family was Catholic and of Polish and Danish descent. Gacy's relationship with his father was fraught with abuse. His father frequently belittled him, calling him dumb and stupid, and often compared him unfavorably to his sisters. This verbal and physical abuse began when Gacy was very young, and one of his earliest memories was of his father beating him at age 4 for accidentally disarranging car engine parts. The elder Gacy's mistreatment continued into Gacy's adolescence, culminating in a severe punishment in 1949 when Gacy was caught fondling a young girl, leading his father to whip him. Gacy's mother, though loving, was unable to protect him from the emotional and physical toll inflicted by his father. Despite this, Gacy sought his father's approval throughout his life, though he often felt he was never good enough. As a child, Gacy struggled with health issues, including blackouts and a heart condition that prevented him from participating in sports. These health challenges, along with the turmoil at home, left him feeling isolated and often hospitalized, which only worsened his academic performance. Gacy's early life set the stage for the complex and dangerous personality he would develop as an adult. By 1960, at age 18, Gacy became involved in local politics, working as an assistant precinct captain for a Democratic Party candidate, a move that further strained his relationship with his father. Despite this tension, Gacy's ambitions continued to grow, and in 1963, he graduated from Northwestern Business College, despite having dropped out of high school. He went on to work for the Nunn-Bush Shoe Company, where he quickly rose through the ranks. In 1964, Gacy married Marlynn Myers, a co-worker, and the couple moved to Waterloo, Iowa, where Gacy managed 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken (KFC) restaurants. This period of Gacy's life seemed to be marked by stability, and he briefly earned his father's approval. However, Gacy's behavior behind closed doors revealed a darker side. He sexually exploited several young men, offering them money or jobs in exchange for sexual favors. This led to his first criminal charge in 1968, when Gacy was accused of sodomizing a 15-year-old boy named Donald Voorhees. Although Gacy initially denied the charges, a psychiatric evaluation confirmed he had an antisocial personality disorder. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, Gacy's time behind bars was paradoxically productive. He quickly became a model prisoner, eventually heading the prison's kitchen, increasing the membership of the inmate JC chapter, and securing various privileges for himself. After serving just 18 months, Gacy was granted parole and returned to Chicago, where he resumed his life. In 1971, Gacy married Carol Hoff, a woman he had briefly dated in high school. The couple settled into a home at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue, where Gacy would later commit his heinous crimes. By day, Gacy worked on his construction business, PDM Contractors, but by night he was indulging his darker desires. He used his business to lure young men, some of whom he coerced into sexual acts. At this time, he also adopted a public persona as Pogo the Clown, a character he created for children's parties and charitable events. This duality, outwardly a helpful, well-regarded member of the community, but secretly a predator, earned him the nickname the Killer Clown. Gacy's business continued to thrive, but his actions became increasingly sinister. He would often sexually abuse his employees, offering them jobs or financial assistance in exchange for sexual favors. By 1975, he had become a deeply dangerous figure, manipulating and exploiting those around him. His second marriage to Carol eventually ended after she discovered his homosexual activities and found evidence of his violent tendencies. John Wayne Gacy's murders, which spanned from 1972 to 1978, represent one of the most heinous killing sprees in American history. Known as the Killer Clown, Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys, many of whom he lured from the streets, offering promises of work or money, or preying on them under the guise of being a police officer. His victims were often abducted, tortured, and murdered in his home, where Gacy's brutal methods of infliction ranged from sexual assault to horrific acts of physical abuse, before eventually strangling or suffocating them to death. The first known murder, Timothy McCoy, occurred in 1972. Gacy lured McCoy into his home, where he killed him after a strange altercation, eventually burying him under the house. This would mark the beginning of a grisly cycle that continued for years. Over the course of his killing spree, Gacy's tactics evolved, with him regularly using handcuffs to restrain his victims, then engaging in prolonged, torturous acts before ending their lives with a rope trick, a tourniquet strangulation method. He would often store bodies in the crawl space beneath his house, pouring quicklime over them to speed up decomposition. His second murder, of an unnamed victim, occurred around 1974. Details are sparse, but Gacy admitted to having killed this individual in a similar fashion. His third victim, John Butkovich, a young man who worked for Gacy, vanished after a confrontation regarding unpaid wages. Gacy's lies to authorities about Butkovich's disappearance were blatant, and his later admission of murdering him and burying him in the garage further revealed the depths of his depravity. By 1976, Gacy had escalated his crimes. His cruising years began, during which he frequently targeted young men, often inviting them to his home under false pretenses. Victims such as Daryl Sampson, Randall Reffett, and Samuel Stapleton were lured to Gacy's house, where they were tortured, murdered, and buried in the crawl space. Gacy's frequent encounters with young men raised suspicions among his neighbors, with some hearing strange noises from his house during the early morning hours, though these concerns were largely ignored. As his killing spree continued, Gacy became more confident in his methods. In 1977, he killed several more victims, including 18-year-old Robert Gilroy, whose body was buried under Gacy's crawl space. By the end of 1977, Gacy had murdered at least 16 more individuals, many of whom were young men in their late teens and early 20s. On the afternoon of December 11, 1978, Gacy visited the Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines to discuss a potential remodeling deal with the store owner, Phil Torf. While he was within earshot of 15-year-old part-time employee Robert Peast, Gacy mentioned his firm often hired teenage boys at a starting wage of $5 per hour, almost double the pay Peast earned at the pharmacy. Shortly after Gacy left, Peast's mother arrived at the store to drive her son home so the family could celebrate her birthday together. Peast asked his mother to wait, adding that, "Some contractor wants to talk to me about a job." He left the store at 9 p.m., promising to return shortly. Peast was murdered shortly after 10 p.m. at Gacy's home. Gacy later stated that at his house, he gave Peast a soft drink before asking whether there was anything he wouldn't do for the right price, to which Peast replied that he did not mind working hard. In response, Gacy stated, good money could be earned by hustling, although Peast was dismissive. Gacy then duped Peast into donning handcuffs. Gacy's subsequent statements regarding the events varied, although in one of his initial statements, he claimed Peast failed to resist as he removed the boy's trousers. He also stated that as he placed the rope around Peast's neck, the boy was crying, scared. Gacy admitted to having received a phone call from a business acquaintance as Peast lay dying. When Peast failed to return home on December 11, 1978, his family immediately filed a missing person report with the Des Plaines Police Department. The last person seen with Peast was John Wayne Gacy, a local contractor and a well-known member of the community. Piest had left his job at the Nissan pharmacy to meet Gacy regarding a job offer, but after that, he vanished. Piest's employer, pharmacist Torf, confirmed that Gacy had been the last person he had spoken to before Piest left the store. Lieutenant Joseph Kozenjak, whose son attended school with Piest, decided to investigate Gacy further. Upon checking Gacy's criminal background, police found that he had an outstanding battery charge in Chicago and had previously been imprisoned for the sodomy of a 15-year-old boy in Iowa. The investigation into Gacy began when Kozenjak and 2 officers visited Gacy's home on the evening of December 12th. Gacy denied offering Piest a job, claiming he had simply asked him if there were any remodeling materials behind the pharmacy.
Afterwards, they're claiming that they came to the front door of the house and knocked on the door and that I hid from them.
Why didn't you let them in at that time when they were knocking at the front door?
There was no way I could have heard them. I was way in the back of the house, in the rec room, on the telephone. When they finally walked around the side of the house, I could look out the picture window, see them there, because I was on the phone, and they could see me clearly too, sitting on the couch on the telephone, because I was talking to my sister in regards to a death in our family. So I told her that I would call her back, got up, went to the door, and he introduced himself as Kozenjak and Piquel, and they wanted to come in and talk to me about Robert Piest. And I had told him that I had not had any conversation with him, but I said, if you want to talk to me, then come back there.
Gacy further insisted that he had returned to the store later that evening to retrieve his appointment book. However, when asked to come to the police station to give a statement, Gacy claimed he was unable to do so immediately because of a family emergency. His uncle had just died. His tone was dismissive, and when questioned further, he snapped, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the dead?" Gacy arrived at the police station at 3:20 a.m., covered in mud and claiming he had been involved in a car accident. The next day, he continued to deny any involvement in Piest's disappearance, sticking to his story that he had only returned to the pharmacy to retrieve his appointment book. However, a check with Torf revealed that no such phone call had been made, casting further suspicion on Gacy. The detectives requested a written statement from him detailing his movements on the evening of December 11th, and during their investigation, they obtained a search warrant to examine Gacy's home. On December 13th, the police executed the first search of Gacy's house. They discovered several suspicious items, including police badges, a starting pistol, handcuffs, hypodermic needles, drugs, pornographic materials, and items like a 2x4 with holes drilled in it. Among the findings was a class ring engraved with the initials JAS and a receipt from Nissan Pharmacy, the very store where Piest had worked. They also found a piece of nylon rope, further raising suspicion. The discovery of these items led investigators to believe that Gacy might be hiding something far darker. Meanwhile, the police continued their surveillance of Gacy as they were unable to find conclusive evidence linking him to Piest's disappearance. Gacy appeared to enjoy the attention, often engaging the surveillance officers in conversation, taunting them by flouting traffic laws, and even inviting them for meals and drinks. He became increasingly paranoid and defensive, denying any involvement in Piest's disappearance. Investigators also learned that Gacy had been connected to other missing persons, including Gregory Godzik and Charles Hatula. As the investigation deepened, the detectives received further troubling information about Gacy's past, including the report from Jeffrey Rignall, who had previously been abducted and tortured by Gacy. This was confirmed by interviews with Gacy's ex-wife, who revealed that he had been involved in the disappearance of another man, John Butkovich. Further investigation led to the discovery that the class ring found at Gacy's home had once belonged to a man named John Allen Seek, whose mother reported that several of her son's belongings were also missing, including a television that had been found in Gacy's possession. On December 16, after several days of mounting evidence, Gacy continued to taunt the detectives, boasting about his political connections and drug use, even as the officers grew more certain that he was involved in the disappearances. A critical breakthrough came when Gacy's former employee, Michael Rossi, admitted that he had helped spread Lyme in the crawl space of Gacy's home in the summer of 1977. This new information prompted investigators to renew their focus on Gacy's home. On December 18th, Gacy invited two detectives to breakfast, and during the conversation he remarked ominously, "You know, clowns can get away with murder." The detectives, already concerned about Gacy's growing erratic behavior, began to believe that the situation was escalating. Later that day, they traced the Nissan pharmacy receipt found in Gacy's kitchen to 17-year-old Kimberly Byers, who confirmed it had been given to Piest before he left the pharmacy. With mounting evidence, investigators obtained a second search warrant on December 19th. The following day, as Gacy's legal battles escalated, he invited the surveillance detectives into his home again, where one officer noticed an unusual smell coming from the bathroom, which he suspected could be the odor of decomposing bodies. This discovery heightened the urgency of the investigation. On the evening of December 20th, Gacy's attorneys were preparing to file a civil suit against the police, but Gacy's erratic behavior only increased the officers' suspicions. Investigators managed to get Gacy to confess that he had been responsible for the deaths of many young men, although he could not remember all their names. He claimed that most of his victims were male prostitutes or runaways whom he lured to his home, strangled and buried in his crawlspace. He also confessed to having disposed of 5 victims in the Des Plaines River. The following day, Gacy's behavior became increasingly incoherent, and he admitted to murdering Piest. He confessed that he had lured the teenager to his house on December 11th, where he strangled him, slept next to his body, and disposed of it in the Des Plaines River. On December 21st, Gacy was arrested and charged with murder after police uncovered human remains in his crawlspace. They also found evidence that Gacy had tried to cover up the murders by flooding the area and attempting to conceal the bodies under concrete. The investigation led to the discovery of at least 29 bodies, most of whom had been buried in the crawlspace, while others were discarded in the nearby river. In the early morning hours of December 22nd, Gacy provided a full confession to the police, admitting to the murder of 30 young men, though he claimed he had killed in self-defense in some cases. His confession was chilling in its details, and he provided specific locations where many of the victims had been buried.
To my understanding, there was a total of 29 bodies, or 28 bodies, were found on the property. 27 of them under the house.
And the rest?
One was under the driveway, one was under the garage. So that makes a total of 29.
Okay. Now, from the standpoint of the arrest, when you were arrested in this matter,
It snowballed.
It snowballed. Okay. What was the date of that arrest? Do you recall?
December 22nd, 1978 is when I was arrested.
Authorities later took Gacy to various sites on his property where they unearthed more remains. John Wayne Gacy's trial began on February 6, 1980, with 33 murder charges brought against him.
So we're saying
I'm constantly told that I'm misquoted constantly, saying that I said this and I said that, and it's not happened.
So it's pretty well established on this. This is the first time you're speaking publicly about your case.
Right.
Yeah.
I've always felt that my attorneys were handling it, and they said to keep a low profile and stay away from it. And in light of all that has been used against me in the media, they've created this fantasy monster image, and it's been going on for the last 12 years. And I've ever had no comment, and I had no need to talk to the media for the simple reason.
You were indicted, convicted, and sentenced on 33 counts of homicide. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The trial took place in Cook County, Illinois, under Judge Louis Garippo, with the jury selected from Rockford due to the heavy media coverage in Cook County. Before the trial, Gacy spent over 300 hours with doctors at Menard Correctional Center undergoing psychological evaluations. He claimed to have multiple personality disorder, asserting that he had 4 distinct personalities: a hardworking contractor, a clown, a politician, and a policeman named Bad Jack, who allegedly committed the murders.
A number of, 3 or 4 psychiatrists, psychologists interviewed
I
you.
had 13 of them. There was 6 for the defense and 7 for the state.
Yeah, what was the
state
position
doctor,
of the defense psychiatrists? What did they feel your problem was? What did they come up with from the standpoint of...
what the hell is it? God, I can't remember offhand. Borderline personality, antisocial behavior. I don't see how anybody could be antisocial when you were involved with the public as much as I was.
How about the multiple personality issue?
Oh, the multiple personality came out of Dr. Reifman and Hartman. These 2 clowns from the Cook County there. They came to see me the first time. I said, "You want to talk to John Wayne Gacy, the politician, the clown, the family man, or the businessman?" The next day, I see it in the newspaper, Gacy has 4 personalities.
His defense team used this claim to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. During the trial, medical examiner Robert Stein testified about the condition of the bodies found on Gacy's property, noting that many were severely decomposed and identified as having died from asphyxiation or strangulation. Gacy's defense argued that the deaths could have been accidental, erotic asphyxia, but Stein dismissed this as highly improbable. Closing arguments in the trial began on March 11, 1980. Prosecutor Terry Sullivan outlined Gacy's history of abusing young men and described his surviving victims as living dead, calling Gacy the worst of all murderers. After the prosecution's closing, the jury deliberated for just under 2 hours before finding Gacy guilty of all 33 murders, as well as sexual assault and indecent liberties in reference to one of his victims, Robert Peast. At the time, this conviction set a record for the most murders for which anyone had been convicted in U.S. history. During the sentencing phase, the jury deliberated for over 2 hours before sentencing Gacy to death for each of the murders that occurred after Illinois reinstated the death penalty in 1977. His execution was scheduled for June 2, 1980. Gacy was transferred to Menard Correctional Center, where he remained on death row for 14 years. In prison, he took up painting, creating artworks depicting clowns, himself as Pogo or Patches, and various other subjects. In 1983, Gacy was stabbed by a fellow inmate, but he survived the attack. Over the years, Gacy filed numerous appeals, but his requests for a new trial or an overturn of his conviction were denied. He claimed that some of the murders were committed by others, including employees with keys to his house, but these claims were dismissed by authorities. In 1984, the Illinois Supreme Court upheld his conviction and confirmed his execution by lethal injection, setting a new execution date for January 11, 1989. Subsequent appeals failed, and in 1993, the U.S. Supreme Court denied his final appeal. His execution was rescheduled for May 10, 1994. Gacy's final meal consisted of KFC, fried shrimp, French fries, strawberries, and a Diet Coke. He was executed at Stateville Correctional Center on the night of May 9, 1994. A crowd of over 1,000 gathered outside, many of them supporters of the execution. The lethal injection procedure was delayed for 18 minutes due to a technical issue, though Gacy was eventually pronounced dead at 12:58 a.m. Following his execution, Gacy's brain was removed for study by Helen Morrison, a psychologist who had interviewed Gacy and other serial killers. His remains were cremated, and the location of his ashes has remained undisclosed. Gacy's case led to significant changes in how missing children cases were handled in Illinois, including the creation of the Amber Alert system. In 1984, Sam Amarante helped draft the Missing Child Recovery Act, which eliminated the waiting period to search for a missing child. This act later influenced the establishment of the Amber Alert system, which has been adopted nationwide. Though Gacy was convicted of 33 murders, 5 of his victims have never been identified. Recent efforts to identify these victims, including DNA testing and facial reconstructions, have helped identify some of the previously unknown victims. Despite Gacy's claim that the total number of victims could have been as high as 45, only 33 have been conclusively linked to him. In short, Gacy's life, characterized by deception and manipulation, shows how even the most trusted members of society can harbor unspeakable darkness. What makes his case even more disturbing is the seemingly ordinary life he led. His public persona as a successful businessman and community figure made it all the more difficult for anyone to suspect the true nature of his crimes. The fact that he was a well-known figure in local Chicago society only deepens the sense of betrayal that his victims' families must have felt. John Wayne Gacy's horrific crimes were not just acts of violence, but systematic, calculated atrocities that went unnoticed for far too long. His ability to lure young men into his home with promises of work or money, only to murder them and hide their bodies beneath his floorboards, speaks to the depths of his depravity. The sheer number of victims, 33 in total, places Gacy among the most prolific serial killers in history, making his case a landmark in criminal psychology and investigation. The discovery of his gruesome crimes was not only a major moment in the history of true crime, but also a turning point for law enforcement, sparking a broader understanding of the psychology behind serial killings. It shed light on the terrifying reality that serial killers often look like everyone else. Gacy's ability to maintain such a normal life, despite his horrific double life, forced authorities to reevaluate their approach to investigating serial murders. In many ways, Gacy represented a new type of criminal, one who wasn't necessarily hiding in the shadows, but instead blending in with society's everyday fabric. In the aftermath of his arrest, Gacy's trial was a spectacle that captivated the nation. His defense, which claimed insanity, was quickly rejected by the jury, and he was convicted on 33 counts of murder. Gacy was sentenced to death, and he spent over 14 years on death row before being executed by lethal injection in 1994. His execution brought an end to a chilling chapter in American crime history, but the scars left by his actions are still felt today. John Wayne Gacy's legacy is one of terror and disbelief, a reminder of how monstrous evil can hide in plain sight. His story forces us to confront the unsettling truth. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile, a suit, and even a clown costume. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time. That's all for this video. We hope you have found this video informative and interesting. What are your thoughts about this case? Let us know in the comments section. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon for more interesting videos like this. Thank you for watching our video.